Thank you very much for the invitation and this opportunity, and thank everyone for tuning in from around the world. I'm really happy to be here, and only sorry that I couldn't actually make it to Korea again. I'm anxious to get back sometime. Anyway, I titled this Some Histories and Futures of Making Music with Computers in the plural, because I think there's much more than just one history or one way to look at things. But these are some just some personal observations, and I'd like to begin by telling you a little more about myself. I can't. If only I could get PowerPoint to change slides. Let's try it this way. Here we go. Okay. So, how did I get here? Well, I studied music and math when I was starting at a pretty young age, and so it almost seems like, you know, my future as a computer music researcher was kind of set at you know, before I even knew it. And when I made it into my teens, in high school, I encountered synthesizers for the first time at a music store, and it was just really eye-opening and ear-opening and mind-opening for me, even though the systems at that time were pretty primitive, certainly by today's standards. I also discovered computers and was very fortunate to enroll in a summer class where I learned to program a computer that really looked like this. It's probably hard for younger people to even imagine a world where you're not just surrounded and immersed in computers, but you have to go to a university or a special place to, you know, even see one. But that's how it was. And pretty soon, just, you know, after I got in college and started studying, I actually designed and built a small computer. This was using, by this time, computers had advanced from, you know, transistors to microprocessors, which made things a lot easier. And I also designed and built a synthesizer that looked a lot like this, actually. And let's see, I would say, you know, one thing led to another, and I soon worked on computer accompaniment systems, which we'll see a sort of historical demo of. I created Audacity in my lab with grad student Dominic Mazzoni, and as you heard, just recently, over the last few years, completed an opera and have been involved in a lot of productions. So, you know, through all this, computer music has really been my passion, and I've thought a lot about, you know, why are we even doing this? Why computer music? And one thing is, I believe there's just a human fascination with automation, which is not just music, but computation in general, computer science, robotics, and even mechanical automation, as you know, is a subject of study that goes back many centuries. And so there's something just human, I think, about this interest. But I believe that the creative arts are especially full of interesting challenges. So if humans are drawn to automation because there's something about machines accomplishing human tasks that's just interesting, then what could be more interesting than the unique human tasks of creating art? And beyond that, I think we all have a passion to create and explore, and computer music is just a great playground for that. So throughout our computer music history, which predates me. I'm not really that old, but computer music goes back about 60 years now. And I've been thinking about where we've been and where we're going. And I believe that we have always been on a path that has to do with three components. And the first of these is sound. So creating sounds, creating instruments in the acoustic world and in the digital world. And then beyond sounds, there's organization of sounds, creating music. And with computers, that means music representation, generating music pieces, and other approaches to the control and specification and representation of sounds in the larger form, organized sound. And then the third stream here has to do with music performance. We have, in the computer music world, have done a lot of work that aims to sort of recreate common performance practice and then also to extend music performance practice. So I think that's what we're really up to and what we've been up to. And one thing that makes this, puts an interesting spin on this is that over the entire period of computer music research, computers themselves have been getting faster and faster at an enormous exponential rate. And I'm sure that's not a surprise to anyone, that's well known, but every once in a while I think it's good to just step back and think about what this means. Getting faster by a factor of 2 or 3 is interesting and a great thing maybe, but when technology advances by an entire order of magnitude, a power of 10, people often say that that's not quantitative, that's a qualitative change that really changes our perspective and our framework. And so in computing, we've had not one qualitative change and not 2, but many. And that really makes the computer unpredictable in many ways. The transition from mainframe computers and punch cards to time-sharing computers to personal computers and workstations, and then to mobile computing in the cloud. Those are all giant steps, order of magnitude changes, and every time we go through one of these revolutions, it gives us a completely new framework and a new set of tools and a new way of just imagining even music. So what I'd like to do is kind of go through some of these changes in a little more detail and examine sort of how the technology change has moved right along by enabling some of these different streams of musical imperatives. So if we go back to the very beginning, again, this is, believe me, before my time, although I did program some mainframe computers, I never made music with one, but Max Matthews certainly did, and there's a whole generation or an era of computing where music was created by programming mainframe computers with punch cards, and some of the big ideas that came out of that reflects these ideas about music, that it consists of sound, and so we have in Music 5 and C sound and C music and many of the early computer music languages, we have a special language, the orchestra language, which allows us to define instruments and really deal with descriptions of sound. But at the same time, those those systems had a second language, which was a score language, basically consisting of node lists in the very beginning, but score languages became sort of a thing and more elaborate as time passed. And you can see in this, on this slide here, 3 lines of a node list from the Music 5 score language. This is not the word not, but short for note, and with a start time and duration and a bunch of parameters. So the thing, if the very first computers told us about or enabled us to work with sounds and with scores, the thing that was left out was performance. And so as soon as computers got fast enough, we moved to the real-time digital instruments. And in the early days, and now we're talking about roughly the 1970s, there were some very expensive commercial products. There were some even more expensive, very custom research systems like the HAL Alice digital synthesizer from Bell Labs. But within 10 years or so, we started to see less expensive devices. Like this is a set of boards that plugs into an Apple II computer and makes controllable sound in real time. In 1983, the Yamaha DX7 came out, which was a real revolution because it was extremely advanced in terms of the VLSI technology that went into it, and Yamaha pushed the chip technology quite a lot in introducing the DX7, even compared to Intel and Motorola and some of the American chip and processor makers. And this enabled a consumer product so that pretty soon digital instruments were sweeping the world. And of course, there were also more expensive but more flexible research systems like the EarCam 4S. So that more or less spanned the 70s, and in the early 80s, I think the big thing that happened was the introduction of the personal computer in a programmable and affordable form. Because what happened in the computer music world is that composers started connecting personal, affordable, they could do things in these digital synthesizers, or even analog synthesizers in some cases, but that enabled them to build interactive systems. And we could name a lot, but what I really wanted to talk about in terms of interactive systems is this picture. So this is my model of trying to explain why I think interactive systems are so important. You know, many people, I think, look at interactive computer music systems as just this thing that processes sound live with a live performer, and that's part of the picture. But for me, what I was very interested in from the very beginning, and some performances I did starting in the 80s, was the idea that with an interactive system, the composer can sort of take ideas of composition, structures, form, scales, relationships, and rhythms, and make those kinds of compositional decisions at performance time. So now, the performer, some of the work of the performer is now happening in real time at the same time that the performer is performing. And so, even though in many systems the performer is less constrained because there's no score, there's no strict set of notes and instructions. We still have influence from the composer because the composer's instructions are actually reacting, making music, and the performer is listening to that music. So any sensitive performer is going to be guided by the compositional sensibilities of the composer to the extent that that can be encoded into a real-time program. And so for me, this has become a new kind of musical score. So instead of constraining the performer by saying, play this note, you constrain the performer by saying, here's what you have to work with, here are a set of interactions, and here are some musical textures, some kind of musical life. And so you can play anything you want, and you can play very virtuosically, and that's wonderful to do that, but you also are constantly reminded of where we are going in compositional terms. And so for me, this is a very new and interesting kind of music that's only possible with computers. Another kind of interaction, real-time interaction, is accompaniment and score following. And so there was and still is a pretty active research area of creating or reproducing, I would say, the scenario of chamber music with performers collaborating together, only now one of those performers is a computer. And we had some sound problems. I can't get, it turns out I can't get sound from Macintosh over Skype, so Young Mi is going to do me the favor of playing this video, and this is the RBD accomp video file. This is a demonstration of a computer accompaniment system. I'm going to begin by loading a file into the program. The file contains a score, and in the score there's a part that I'm going to play on trumpet. That's also displayed on the screen. There's another part, which is an accompaniment part, in this case composed quite some time ago. The purpose of the program then is to listen to my performance, a live performance of the solo part, and to synchronize the other parts and play them along with me. The computer accompaniment system is based on a very robust pattern matcher that compares the notes of the live performance as I play them to the notes that are stored in the score. To illustrate how well the pattern matching works, I'm going to deliberately create a nightmare for the accompanist by playing lots of wrong notes, changing the tempo, and missing some notes. if I can get the screen back. Okay, I'm back.
Now?
Yeah, you can see my screen now?
Not now.
Oh.
Yeah, you can see.
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to introduce the next video. This work has continued, and one of the things I've been looking at for the last, well, actually 5 years or so, I guess, maybe more, is that this model of the computer in a more or less chamber music situation is just not appropriate for popular forms like rock and jazz and folk music, because in those performances, there's a lot more possibility for improvisation, and musicians synchronize more on the beat and maintaining strict time than by following a score or knowing the score. And because time is really less flexible in the expressive timing sense, musicians actually synchronize very closely to where the kind of the groove or the feel of the music might depend on very accurate displacements of time on the order of a few tens of milliseconds. And so this is a different kind of approach where the main goal here is to be able to synchronize on steady beat music that has a lot of improvisations, and we are currently getting tempo just from a simple foot tapper, although getting timing very precise is still a big challenge. And in this video, this is the Carnegie Mellon Jazz Ensemble, and they're playing along with a virtual string orchestra that's coming out of a 20-track recording where every track is an individual string player, violin, viola, and cello. And each one of those parts is time stretched with a very high quality real-time time stretching algorithm to adapt to the band. So instead of playing with click tracks, essentially the click track is being given to the computer and it's adjusting in real time. So let's play this video. This is the file that says "Alone Together." So this is too long to play the whole thing. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just play about 20 seconds from in the very beginning,
Okay.
and then we'll play about 20 seconds of the very end.
Okay. It's along together, right?
Right. Oh, and maybe I have to stop sharing. Sorry.
So you want to start from about 20 seconds, or?
Just start from the very beginning, but,
Okay.
but stop it in after 20 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. If you can, okay. if you, I'm not sure if this video was from, yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so that's, yeah, let's stop it.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say, so this is, the upright bass, string bass is the soloist here, but all the other strings you heard were the computer string. Okay, and I think it's kind of hard to navigate this way, so let's just play from about 12 minutes, if you can find 12 minutes, or it'll be less 20 or 30 seconds.
12 minutes, you said?
Yeah, 12 minutes would be good.
Okay. This is 12 minutes.
Good. Okay, that's good. Okay, I'll leave the rest to your imagination, and I want to get through some more material, and we have some at least one more video coming up. Let's see. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so just to summarize where we are so far, I believe that computer music has been a sort of a grand enterprise to extend music creation and performance, and we've done that by focusing on instruments, on organization phrases, on entire compositions, and on music collaboration or music performance. And so now what I would like to do is talk about what the future might look like if we try to take those three streams and imagine where they can take us in the future. First of these, and Young-Mi, I'm going to ask you to do the next, or get the next video ready. This is one thing that I think is very, so this is the video called Glasgow, or maybe Bagpipes. I think robot instruments are a growing interest and are going to be very important in the future. So. Okay,
Sorry.
back.
I think I get the file downloading was something problem, so.
Hi, should I go on?
You wanna check the file again? I can share the screen again. Is this the right sound?
Hi. Yeah, I think we should. You're back. I'm back. If everybody's still here, I think I should just go on.
Yes, everyone's here.
Okay.
And please keep going. Sorry.
Okay, let's go on. I'm going to share the screen again. All right. And I've got one more thing for you, Yanni. We're going to try the MP3 file after I explain this.
Okay.
And this will be my last piece of media. Okay, so what I should say about instruments and robots is that I believe in the future there will be a new technology of personal robots and humanoid robots. And we've actually done some research that shows that when people watch interactive humanoid robots perform, they have a very different perception of the music than either simply having interactive music with no humanoid robot or with having a non-interactive, let's say, animatronic sort of sequence performance by a robot. So it's only the combination of interaction and humanoid that create a significantly different perception of interactive computer music. So I think that's very exciting and something that we're going to see a lot of in the future. So the next topic here is about performing phrases. And what I'd like to say about this is that from the earliest beginnings of computer music with Music 5 and the work of Max Matthews, we've taken a sort of engineering approach to music where we build models that consist of a note model. Here's what it takes to make a note. And then we have scores that are sequences of notes. And we have this idea sort of embedded into many, many computer music systems that you can make music just by summing up independently generated notes. And that's just an oversimplification that's not very realistic and it's not very musical. And you can show that perceptually and also just by measuring. So for example, if you're a wind player and you play a musical phrase where the notes are slurred, just even the envelopes of the notes, the amplitude envelopes are just radically different from the kind of envelopes you get when you play notes in isolation. So phrasing is really critical, and it's been largely ignored in the computer music world, although certainly composers that are controlling things at a very detailed level, of course, pay great attention to constructing phrases and linking sounds together. So this work I'd like to show you is our attempt at going beyond sampling, which is definitely that same model of, you record notes independently, individually, and splice them together in a sampling synthesizer as if you're going to be able to play phrases. And it's no wonder that sampling has problems. Also, no wonder that sample libraries are now gigabytes in size, because people realize that there's not just one note that Trump could display or one shape, but even then, it's a problem. So in this system, this is the result of work from Ning Hu, a PhD student of mine, and the goal of the system is to input actual recordings of live acoustic instruments performing scores. So we input both the recording and the score from which the recording was derived. And from that, the computer system automatically builds a performance model, which is sort of a mapping from the score information into continuous control over here. And then an instrument model, which you can think of as a synthesizer, except it's not controlled by no particular controls that specify time varying amplitude, vibrato, pitch, articulation, and so on. And these continuous controls drive the instrument model, and the sound comes out. And I'd like to play the sound example that we're going to hear is the result of building a model of a bassoon, and then we gave this bassoon model a score that system has never seen before or heard before, and the computer synthesized directly from a symbolic score. So there's no video here, this is just sound.
It's the Emerald Gen, right?
Yeah, I forgot the name of, tell me the name again?
Emerald.
Yes, Emerald. MP3.
Can you hear it now? I don't have to share the screen, right?
Oh, maybe I should, yeah, I forgot. Okay,
Okay.
let's try it.
I can just be there.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try to grab the screen back. And okay, so that little slow down, I don't know if you heard that slow down at the end. That wasn't us. That was Skype. And but these sound examples are online if someone would like to hear a little higher quality performance. And anyway, let's. Yeah. Okay. So the next little. I'd like to take a little interlude and talk about progress from research to practice. And just to make the point, this is real electronics from an experimental sound studio on the left. And what do we have today? We have modular, ready to use, very easy to use, refined components that that rock musicians and non-engineers can put together and use with standard cables, standard voltages. Everything's very compatible and pluggable, which is enabled enormous growth of music and electronic music practice in the world. And I think the same thing applies to the kind of research and software systems we build today. So we have, this is the Canadian Electronic Ensemble with lots of digital and analog gear and cables and connections and software and interfaces of all different kinds. And I think, if we think forward to where that could go, we might end up with something more like this, where everything is software, it's very modular, and instead of thinking about plugging together effects, we could actually plug together virtual musicians. So imagine a smart drummer, an AI horn section, automatic string section, a virtual bass player, and of course these will understand how to perform together because they'll be modular and using built in a compatible way, just the way we use audio plugins or electronic devices, and they will all be able to collaborate with one another and be able to collaborate with humans. On the compositional front, I think I will just give a quick overview that we've made a lot of progress and there's a great deal of activity, but I think composing has a long way to go. But I do see the possibilities of progress from very simple tasks and very constrained tasks like generating drum loops and using textures towards improvisation, which is a very, somewhat constrained task that right now seems to mainly require a focus on longer-term structure and storytelling and call and response, the kind of planning that master improvising musicians can bring to improvisation that machines are not able to provide yet. And then at some point in the future, maybe we will actually have intelligent creative compositions coming from computers. And I just want to note that one of the big problems with composition by computers, at least the way it's being treated by a lot of engineering types right now, is that composition is regarded as some kind of imitation, where you feed in as lots of examples of music and ask a machine learning system to imitate those samples. But how many composers actually aim to merely imitate music that they've heard before? So that's a challenge for the future. I wanted to talk a little about some grand projects that we've considered, and I feel like I'm running out of time, so let me just throw this out there with very little explanation, but something that we've talked about at Carnegie Mellon, and it was kind of brought to us by my colleague Roland Chen, is a very interesting project that really brings together many different threads of research in computer music and machine learning and other in this music. And this is that Jerry Garcia, who was the guitar player, composer, former with the Grateful Dead, is no longer with us, and millions of fans miss him. So the question is, can we develop and apply artificial creative intelligence to fill the gap that he has left? And there are 5 terabytes of concert recordings of the Grateful Dead. It's 10,000 hours. And so we sort of envision a future where using machine listening and machine modeling, we could somehow create a model of the work and creativity of Jerry Garcia, and by combining that with some of these human computer music performance advances, we might actually in the future be able to perform with a virtual Jerry Garcia. And that would not only be really interesting, but of course have many applications to modeling other musicians, modeling musicians that never existed before except in the artificial world, and so on. So just to wrap up, if we stand back far enough, I believe we can see computer music as a grand undertaking to explore and automate every aspect of music making, with clear progressions in the area of sounds, from reproduction to new sounds, in the area of scored from representation systems to real music, the area of performance, from digital instruments to interactive systems and towards real music collaboration. So I think in that term, in that sense, the future trends are clear, but I think the outcomes will always surprise us because the exponential growth of computing power is just enabling things that are hard to even imagine today. So let's hope that our continued work in the area of computer music, both as scientists and engineers and artists, brings us more musical knowledge, and from that knowledge we gain musical wisdom. So thank you.
So I suppose we still have a few minutes for questions. Are you willing to take any questions from our virtual or virtual present? Does anybody have any? I guess start with the people who were in the room. Does anybody here have a question they would like to ask Roger?
컴퓨터로 해주셔도 돼요. 전혀 이거 다 해드릴 거예요. Could you tell us more about the imitation you said? You said the composer can't merely imitate the technicians or just the composers?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Sure. So, there's a lot of work and a lot of excitement now, I would say, about neural networks and deep learning, and a very kind of standard approach now taken by people interested in getting computers to compose music is applying existing technologies that are mainly developed for natural language and other learning tasks, but they're general techniques for learning sequences. So people regard music as a sequence that's predictable, and if you can predict, if you're given a sequence, a partial sequence, and you can predict what's going to happen next, then you can build a music generator just by predicting what's next. You play that, and then you predict what comes after that. And so this is a very standard kind of sequence learning approach. And the problem with that is, and I like this example someone came up with at a workshop I was attending. They said, think about Charlie Parker, the great jazz saxophone player. If you wanted to use sequence learning to learn to play like Charlie Parker, you would probably take the collected works of Charlie Parker, all of these sequences, and you would feed those in as examples to a sequence learner and try to learn how to predict what Charlie Parker would play. But if you think about the actual Charlie Parker recordings, he walked into every studio that recorded him, so hundreds of recordings and albums, and he did not know what he was going to play next. And when he started recording, most of the complete works of Charlie Parker were still in the future. So there's no way that a real accurate model of Charlie Parker could be based on learning all of what Charlie Parker played, because he was capable of playing all of that without having heard it yet. And so I think that if we think of composing as sequence learning and imitation of other works, we're missing out on maybe some of the most important aspects of composition.
Yes.
What's interesting, though, is that you go from that point there, right? So how many composers aim to merely imitate, etc. But then, isn't your Jerry Garcia project kind of exactly that. Like you're feeding the idea of feeding a model and a giant corpus of pre-existing Jerry Garcia to create new, identifiably Jerry Garcia-esque music. No?
Yeah, that's true. It is at least at least a first approximation and a first implementation. I mean, I would hope that if we were actually able to get this far, that part of what would make this model interesting is the ability to actually go beyond and imagine, what Jerry Garcia would play today if he were still with us. The other thing that makes this project interesting is that there are just so many problems, beyond composing and improvising. There are problems of source separation and music analysis and understanding the compositional aspects of these long jams that, went up to 45 minutes on a single song that the Grateful Dead played. And so there's just, many, many different aspects of music and signal processing and machine learning and even music theory and models that all would have to come together. It's like putting a man on the moon. It's not just building a big rocket. It's life support and tracking and computing and communications and so many things came together that makes it really exciting.
Because it seems like this would be a great first step, but then the more interesting thing, after establishing this virtual forever Jerry Garcia, would be to put this virtual Jerry Garcia into unforeseen performance situations or performing with other virtual existing models that he would never have played with maybe in his lifetime, right? So that you model some kind of weird, like this is just the starting point, and then from then on you can sort of hack the thing and imagine Jerry Garcia on stage with a musician, say, who doesn't even exist yet, like maybe whatever, Jerry Garcia on stage with like BTS or whatever, some crazy thing, to see what would happen, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. You've pictured all of the ideas we came up with, including what if Jerry Garcia performed with Ravi Shankar or Miles Davis or what if you have the personal versions and you can just pick out your favorite artists and your favorite tunes and say, play this for me, please. And much more, that's, what if he were, what if Jerry Garcia were a saxophone player? What would that be like? Lots of possibilities.
I wonder if we have any questions from our virtual guests. Are we able to do that? Any questions? Oh, we have a question for you.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. It was really nice. I'm a classical music pianist, and I didn't really know about computer music history, so it's a really good opportunity to learn something about that. As a pianist, I'm interested in what you said about computer accompaniment. So you build this system, and then you play the saxophone. Trumpet. Yeah, trumpet. You play the trumpet, and it was very cute that at the end of the tune, I like the ritardando you did it. So the system followed you, or you built with the ritardando?
In this example, the system was following me.
Okay.
Sometimes, I mean, and that was in many ways, we were really pushing things to make an obvious demo, but if you were using this in a concert situation and really cared about musicality, you would probably have something equivalent to rehearsals where the computer would expect some tempo change, especially at the end, but it would still be able to make fine adjustments according to what the soloist is doing live.
Right. And I'm also curious, how about you said that about the machines having little understanding of tempo, timbre, and form. But what about the dynamics or tone colors also can follow you, or the computer can follow you, or if that's yes, who is the performer to the agency? I'm just curious. For this case, you build this system, so but what about I play piano with this accompaniment, computer accompaniment, and who is the agency? Am I playing? Is there two performers, or I'm the agency because the computer just following me, my musicality?
Yes. So the audio was breaking up a bit there, but in general, we have built systems that follow groups of musicians. We built systems that follow keyboard players. We built systems that follow vocalists. So these are all interesting and somewhat different challenges. And the most recent work would be, at least from my lab, is a PhD thesis from Gus Jia, who worked on collaborative performance, so modeling. In his case, most of the work that he did was on piano duets and trying to build machine models for how pianists listen to each other and adapt to each other expressively, and yes, including both timing and dynamics and articulation. The dynamics is an interesting problem because, you know, when if you're playing with someone and they play louder, does that mean they think they're not loud enough, so you should play softer? Or does that mean the music is getting louder and you should play louder? So it's all kind of relative and based on your expectation and understanding. So it's a difficult problem, but that's, you know, those are kinds of problems that people are still working on today.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
May I ask a question?
Please.
Sure.
So I want to follow up on the Jerry Garcia question, and on the slide, and also when you said it, you talked about artificial creative intelligence. How do you define creativity, and how can you make sure that it's not your creative imagination of what Jerry Garcia would do today? Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. This reference in the lower right here, Bolshin was the first author that is on artificial creative intelligence, breaking the imitation barrier, that was at the recent computational creativity conference. And in that paper, we proposed a sort of hierarchy of intelligence and creativity. And so very simple pattern recognition and discrimination tasks are kind of down at the bottom. And as we work up to more intelligence and problem solving, creativity is this level up at the top. So we tried to kind of form a taxonomy and give some idea of what these, you know, how one might think about creative intelligence as opposed to other kinds of intelligence. But you know, evaluation of creativity is very difficult, and there's a lot of thought about that, but by no means is that a solved problem.
Thank you.
Sorry if that's a cop-out, but
No, this is great. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I think we can wrap it up there and thank our keynote speaker for an excellent keynote and move on to our next speaker. So a little round of applause for Roger. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be here.